On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump will be sworn into office. And on that day, he's going to begin his attack on civil rights. They have made that very clear. And ironically and unfortunately, that is the same day that we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the man who gave his life for civil rights. Stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to talk about how we can fight Trump's and MAGA's anti-civil rights agenda. Stay with me. Thank you for staying with me. I am civil rights attorney Augustus Corbett. Each and every week, we bring you a legal analysis of some trending story regarding politics, policies, personalities, or pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy this unjust legal system and to nullify systemic racism. If that interests you, and it really, really should, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell so you'll get notified every time we upload one of these powerful and informative videos. Now, before we get into this message today, please go over to Amazon.com and grab your copy of my book, Education and Justice, because you'll learn in this book the many ways that public schools mistreat African American male students and what you can do to help your son, your grandson, whatever the case may be. So hurry over there and get your copy of my book today. And thank you very much. All right, let's get into this. We're going to watch 3 different videos to start things off. The first video is Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Congressman Jackson and I went to college together, as well as his brother Jesse Jr. The second video is Christopher Wray, the FBI director. And the third video is a Trump ally, Charlie Kirk, espousing his hate and disdain for the Civil Rights Act. All right, let's go to Jonathan Jackson first.
And I rise today because I fear that this nation is on the precipice of the greatest rollback of civil rights since the end of Reconstruction in 1890. I rise today because there are too many of my colleagues, in addition to too many people in America, who have no problem with rolling back the rights of the weakest and most vulnerable among us. Given the long and meandering history of this republic, there ought to be unanimous consent when it comes to ensuring that the people who have been systematically excluded from the American dream are continually included in the future of American progress and prosperity. But sadly, that is not the case. Whole segments of this society have arbitrarily decided that they have the omnipotent right to determine when there are too many black people in boardrooms, as we saw in June of 29 and 2023 with the elimination of the affirmative action programs. As a consequence, there are fewer African Americans in dental school, there are fewer African Americans in law school, fewer African Americans attending some of the most prestigious universities. Some people have determined arbitrarily that African Americans enrolled in these selective universities is too much, as determined by the actions of the Students for Fair Admission authored by Mr. Bloom, or too many black businesses finally being included in the procurement of government contracts and managing opportunities is too much. And it pains me to have to remind the leaders of this country that a nation suffering from the sickness of racism for 250 years cannot stop taking its medicine it needs to make sure that the cancer does not return. 50 years of progress cannot erase 250 years of suffering.
All right, so there are Congressman Jonathan Jackson's powerful words and his concern that civil rights will be rolled back under this second Trump administration. All right, now let's go to, again, FBI Director Christopher Wray.
Today, the FBI is the only federal agency charged with investigating civil rights violations, which include hate crimes and color of law violations. Civil rights violations have been increasing for some time, which is why in 2021, the FBI elevated civil rights to a national threat priority. In plain English, that means the program receives more resources and that civil rights violations jump a lot of other investigations in priority at every field office. And this year, we increased the number of people specifically committed to investigating civil rights crimes to 176 special agents, plus 57 analysts.
Now, that was short, but that was informative. We learned that the FBI is the only agency, federal agency, that investigates civil rights violations. We also learned that under the Biden-Harris administration, the focus on civil rights increased, as well as resources to pursue those investigations. That is really important, especially for those folks who love to say that Joe Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Democrats do nothing to help black people. Because I assure you that all of that is going away under the Trump administration. All right, now let's go and listen to Charlie Kirk as he talks about his disdain for the Civil Rights Act. This is very short.
And the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon. This topic would have been even more forbidden 4 or 5 years ago, but it's now becoming in more and more mainstream circles. Is that because the problem is becoming worse, or but our side is more courageous to confront it? Why does Kirk believe passing the Civil Rights Act was a mistake? Now, again, apparently they don't listen to the show because we do that at least once a week, right? Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. The present reality, not the ideal, the reality of the Civil Rights Act and how it's being used is making it harder for us to pursue excellence as a society. Here's a fact. Since the Civil Rights Act passed, I think that it's fair to say any sort of racist sentiments that are in America have gone, at least individually amongst white people, towards black people have gone away. What I'm trying to counter is the reason we talk about race so much is because we have a federal holiday to a guy that talked about race all the time.
Oh, boy, he says the reason we have racial problems in this country is because we have a federal holiday for a guy, he's talking about Dr. King, who talked about race all the time. Well, why did Dr. King talk about race all the time? Because of 400 years of racial oppression, Charlie Kirk. And one of the ways that we try to address that racial oppression is with the Civil Rights Act, which you now want to gut and do away with. And he has the ear of Trump and MAGA. So, man. Anyway, I definitely share Congressman Jackson's concerns about the Civil Rights Act, just civil rights in general. For the last year, in fact, I worked diligently to warn blacks that MAGA would try to gut the Civil Rights Act. I'd hoped that this would motivate black voters to overwhelmingly reject Trump and MAGA at the polls. Despite my and others' best efforts, it was apparent from the comments of many blacks on my channel that they did not understand how critical the Civil Rights Act is for blacks, or they had been completely contaminated with disinformation about the Civil Rights Act. I couldn't get through to many of those trolls. Hence, many blacks voted the couch or for MAGA, helping Trump and MAGA win this election. Now, attacking the Civil Rights Act, as you heard for yourself, is a major part of their agenda. And I must say how thoroughly frustrating and sad it is that any black person did anything to help Trump win and endowed him with the power to gut civil rights protections. Some of these black men who voted for Trump have come to this channel and proudly stated they voted for Trump. And I just wonder if they realized they were empowering Trump to harm their children, their grandchildren, their family, their community. or if they simply didn't care. But also, let's be clear that black men, the few who voted for Trump, are not the major reason Trump won. It was white people primarily who voted for Trump and voted him into office, knowing his antagonism against black equality and civil rights. All right, so let's look forward. What are we going to do now? Simply put, we must fight. They want us to be silent and intimidated. We refuse to. To fight back and defend civil rights, an urgent part of that fight is taking back one or both of the chambers of Congress. To do that, we must fight disinformation. Therefore, to do our part, we created the Civil Rights Act Academy, or CRAA. The CRAA is a series of videos and Zoom calls that I'll use to explain the basics of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, its importance, its key titles, and how it impacts our daily lives. It cannot be overstated that we created the CRAA primarily because black people face an onslaught of disinformation about the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement, and its leaders. This disinformation is designed to erode confidence in the Civil Rights Act. Without that confidence and knowledge, black people will not prioritize the fight to protect it. They may stay home on election day or even vote against their best interests. Again, purported pro-black content creators on social media are the ones who spread much of this disinformation. I call them pro-black imposters. Now, I'll switch my attention to how Trump and MAGA may fight the Civil Rights Act. Here are some of the ways that they may do so. First, in the judicial branch, they will continue stacking the federal courts with right-wing, anti-civil rights judges and justices. Trump could get multiple chances over the next 4 years to nominate SCOTUS justices, and there are a slew of open federal benches. Second, they will continue taking civil rights cases to SCOTUS because they know they have a very good chance of getting anti-civil rights opinions. After all, SCOTUS has already basically gutted the Voting Rights Act of '65. Third, in the legislative branch, they could weaken or gut the Civil Rights Act by repealing certain parts of it. Congress could also defund its enforcement. And in the executive branch, Trump will issue executive orders where he can. Also, his political appointees will erase any civil rights regulations Biden and Harris promulgated in any federal agency. Additionally, they have promised to fire federal employees who are identified as being woke, the so-called deep state, which means these federal workers are on the chopping block simply because they're open to civil rights enforcement. That's it. They could also reframe civil rights enforcement in terms of so-called fake reverse discrimination cases, again, which is a farce. Now, outside the government, they will continue to target blacks and others with disinformation. They'll also continue working with states to prohibit public schools from teaching true history, the true history of America and its racial oppression of African Americans in school for the sole purpose of indoctrinating young people. Those are some of the many ways they will push an anti-black, anti-civil rights agenda. Now, in the next video, I'll talk about the basics of the Civil Rights Act. All right, so make sure you watch every one of these videos because informing you so you can inform others is a very important part of our fight back. Again, it's important that you watch all these videos and learn all that I say here so that you will be informed and can inform others in our effort to debunk disinformation. Thank you for watching. I am civil rights attorney Augustus Corbett. Until the next time, peace.